What I want to do in this video is explain to you the importance of settling your case or resolving your case at the right time during the life of your case. And what I'm going to demonstrate to you is that in many instances, it's better to accept an earlier settlement which is lower than a later settlement which is higher. And the difference primarily is in your attorney's fees and your costs. So what we're going to do is set up our example, and I'm going to call the first option, we'll call this number 1. This is what we're going to call the pre-suit settlement. This is where we would settle your case before we actually filed a lawsuit. The second option is what we call post-suit. This is where we settle your case after we file the lawsuit. We either settle your case or we get a jury verdict in your favor. Now, as we go through this example, what I want you to focus on is not the amount of money that we recover from the other party. I want you to focus on the amount of money that you're putting in your pocket. We call that the net settlement. And if the roles were reversed and you were my attorney, the net settlement would be the only amount of money that would matter to me. Because to use a silly example, if I got you $1 million for your case, but I'm taking out $990,000 in attorney's fees and costs and other expenses, and you get 10 grand, while that $1 million sounded good, the net result to you is certainly less than satisfactory. So what I'm going to do is set this up. We're going to talk about first a pre-suit settlement of $60,000 and how that compares to a post-suit settlement of $100,000. Now, obviously, right off the bat, you can see that this number, what we call the gross settlement amount, is significantly higher than the $60,000. But in reality, what does that mean to you as the client? Well, the first component that you need to consider are your attorney's fees. The good news is that your attorney's fees pre-suit are 1/3, and post-suit they're 40%. So let's compare. So pre-suit, 1/3 of 60 would be $20,000, which leaves $40,000. Post-suit, your fees are 40%, not 1/3. So a $100,000 gross settlement would result in a $40,000 attorney fee, which leaves $60,000. Well, so far you may say, well, post-suit looks better because $60,000 is certainly more than $40,000. Well, let's say you got $10,000 in medical bills. So that comes out, which leaves $30,000 over here. Take out the $10,000 over here. That leaves $50,000. Well, $50,000 is still worth, still more money than 30, but then we get to your costs. Now, a lot of people confuse costs with the attorney fees. And remember what we said a little while ago. Pre-suit, your fees are 1/3 or 33.33%. Post-suit, your fees are 40%. And that's a standard contingency fee agreement that attorneys use throughout the state of Florida. The costs are different than the attorney's fees. The costs are the hard costs, the checks that we actually write to make sure we get you a good result in your case. I'll give you some examples. We start out in your case, I'll use a typical automobile accident case as an example. We get the official automobile accident report, the Florida traffic crash report, and there's a cost associated with that. We use a service. It's a fairly modest cost. We do not add anything to any of these costs, by the way. There's no additional profit. There's no administrative fees or junk fees. These are all costs that we actually incur. So in a typical automobile accident case, we get the accident report, the crash report, then we start getting all of your medical records. As you can imagine, the facilities, the hospital, the doctors, they charge reproduction costs. They charge us to get those records. So we have to pay that. We don't charge regular postage, which is unusual for a law practice. We have a paperless practice, so we're very efficient. The only postage we charge for is certified mail. Very rarely does that exceed $25 or $30 in a case, because there's about a half a dozen letters, maybe less, that we send out via certified mail. But again, the costs are different. They're separate, and they're in addition to your attorney's fees here. The costs in your case are vastly different if we settle your case pre-suit or if we settle your case post-suit. In a typical pre-suit case, and again, to be fair, you can't rely specifically on the dollar number that I'm going to use in this example because it's simply an example, but I want to illustrate the dramatic difference between the two costs. So let's say pre-suit, your costs are $2,500. And that's the last thing that we're deducting out of your $60,000 settlement. So your net settlement would be $27,500. That would be the check that we write to you. This is what we call the net settlement. And again, this is the only number that you should be concerned about. While your costs would be $25,000 pre-suit, post-suit, your cost can be high as $30,000. And I'll tell you why. After we file the lawsuit, or when we file the lawsuit, we have a filing fee of nearly $500. We have a service of process fee of nearly $100 to actually serve that complaint on one defendant. If there's multiple defendants, there's additional service of process fees. We have deposition fees. Every time I want to depose a witness in the case, we have to pay a court reporter to attend. If I want to get the written version of that deposition, called a deposition transcript, we have to pay for that. That can be $800 or $1,000. If we are hiring experts in your case, medical experts, and taking a typical automobile accident case involving a herniated disc, we'll have a radiologist who will interpret the MRI, the film that shows your herniation. We will have an orthopedic doctor who will express an opinion concerning the nature and extent of your injuries and the cause of that injury. And potentially we will have a neurologist also. Those are just medical experts. We may also have damage experts in your case. If it's contested liability, we may have an accident reconstructionist. We may have an engineer. All of those experts are very, very expensive. And in my experience, post-suit costs in a routine, uncomplicated case, by the time we get the case prepared for trial and we've hired those experts, oh, I didn't mention this, we have to pay for the privilege of taking the deposition, of asking questions of the defense experts. So even though they work for the defense, if I want to depose those experts, and we always will depose those experts if they're going to testify against us, we have to pay them. That can be as high as $2,500. So imagine they have 3 experts. I'm going to spend $7,500 potentially just to take those 3 depositions, to pay the doctors. If I want those transcripts, I'm potentially paying another $700 or $800 each. So this number here, in terms of your costs, can be, let's just use for our example, $25,000. And what you'll see is the big difference here. And using this example, and by the way, these are real numbers. These are not made up numbers. This is based on my experience. The cheapest I've ever been able to try a case is roughly $25,000. So in this example, your net result is $25,000. Look at the difference here. This is $60,000 in pre-suit settlement versus $100,000 in a post-suit settlement. What initially appeared to be $40,000 more post-suit actually results, using our example, using real numbers, in $2,500 less in your pocket. Less in your pocket. Now, if I were to try your case to a jury and we got a positive, a favorable jury verdict, then the defense would have to pay these costs. But that's not part of this particular discussion. I'll address that in a separate video. This concerns settlements without going to court. So when I'm explaining to you why sometimes it's advantageous, it's to your benefit to settle your case pre-suit for a lower gross number, in this case $60,000, you can see, and I've demonstrated to you using these examples, how that can be actually better for you monetarily. So whenever you and I are talking about settlements, we're not going to focus on these gross amounts, the amount of money we get in. What we're going to focus on is the net amount, because I have two jobs to do in your case. Not only do I have to get you the highest gross settlement that's possible, I have to put the most money in your pocket. And we're very, very concerned about that. We take that obligation very, very seriously. A lot of lawyers will not explain to their clients how this works. Why? Well, look at this example here. I would make $20,000 more if I pushed you to settle your case post-suit. Double what I would make over here. And you may think, if you're not educated about this, well, gee, that's great. I mean, Cavonis got me an extra $40,000. Well, no. What really happened was you got $2,500 less. So unfortunately, what happens, of course, with a lot of lawyers and law firms is that they kind of push you here because it's in their best interest, because their attorney's fees are higher. But it's not in your best interest. So when we're talking about these settlement numbers, we're going to focus solely on the net settlement amount. And if you have any other additional questions about this, please give us a call. Monica or I would be happy to answer these questions. And I certainly hope that it helps you understand and more fully appreciate the recommendations that I'm going to make in your case later on.